Let's talk, heart to heart.
Hello, welcome, whether you're listening live or to the recording anytime. Glad you're here. Let's continue on our conversation of spiritual things. I've been going over a list of what I believe are 5 benefits of trouble, of affliction or suffering, 5 biblical benefits for your consideration. And this isn't an exhaustive list or an absolute list, but they are things that I've come across, and I've been sort of highlighting friends that I've met along the way who've taught me these lessons. And so let's continue down that path. Last week we asked the question, what examples do you know where affliction has revealed truth? And that seemed like maybe that was a hard question. It's probably not something that people really think of, whether affliction brings about truth. I was trying to show that when you're in a body of water and you're looking for something to give you a foundation, something to grab a hold of, you reach out and you try things. And if something's stable, it proves itself to be stable in that moment. And that's sort of what I meant, that in these times of suffering, truth shows itself. But I asked what you thought of that. And there were 3 comments in particular I want to talk about. One was that suffering brings an opportunity. It's a responsibility in that moment where it's actually easier to respond in ways that don't promote truth. It's an effort of strength to be able to look for truth and to demonstrate truth. I was trying to also say that I think truth proves itself for onlookers. So as people are watching you, they see truth coming up. Another commenter mentioned the story of Job, that he remained faithful and he stayed loyal to God even though he was in trouble. And that probably is the big biblical example, although there's so many situations in which troubles come and people have faith. David, all the greats really had real moments of struggle and trouble, everyone in the Bible. And then we see that their faith in God was demonstrated to be true because God proved to be faithful. Another commenter talked about death being the ultimate demonstrator of truth, that we don't like to think about it, but when we look ahead toward death, the way life ends, we search, and that searching brings us to truth, to an apprehension of truth. So thanks for your comments. Please keep those comments coming. They're a very important part of what we do on the show. So this week we're going to talk about God's sufficiency as a benefit of trouble. I want to introduce you to my friend Bill Heiser. He's one of my mentors. Bill passed away several years ago, and I miss him very much. In fact, I had a sense that Bill and I would be working together. I was wrong, of course, but I had hoped that Bill and I would be doing this work that I'm doing right now, and that he'd be one of the people coming to you each week and giving his perspective. Not only was Bill a loving husband and a concerned father and good friend, but he was also an American war hero. And he used a wheelchair, but that's not really what I remember him for. Most importantly, I think he deeply loved God and heartily loved other people. He was a guy with strong passion, and you always felt that you mattered to Bill. Bill was paraplegic. One of the lessons that Bill taught me, maybe he taught some of you, maybe you know him, but he gave a presentation one time, and he said, when I go into a room, I make a scene. There's no way for me to enter a room in a wheelchair quietly. I might not make noise, but heads turn in a different way than they do for most people. I don't go anywhere. I don't shop. I don't go out. I don't drive and get out of my car without making a scene. He said it's sort of an interesting thing that my name is Bill, because so often I feel like a billboard. And he went on to say that that God had put him in his situation, and that he really didn't have a choice as to whether he was a billboard or not. That had seemed to be predetermined. But it did strike him that he had the opportunity to determine what the billboard said, what people would see when they saw him, when he did distract or brought attention to himself. What kind of message was he going to be delivering? It's a unique calling that Bill had a sense for. And I think that's a bit of what the verse that I want to show you this week is referring to. There's a number of passages along these lines. Corinthians, I want to show you two verses from Corinthians. First, 2 Corinthians, chapter 1, verses 8 through 11. This is from Paul. Paul says, "We do not want you to be uninformed about the hardships we suffered. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God. On him we've set our hope, and he will continue to deliver us as you help us by your prayers. Then many will give thanks on our behalf for the gracious favor granted us in answer to the prayers of many." Paul was in the midst of some pretty rough times, and he was explaining those rough times in very interesting terms. He didn't avoid that. In fact, he said that this happened in order that they might have their that they might be humble, that they might not rely on themselves. Remember, at the very beginning, we talked about worldview. And we talked about whether your worldview essentially starts from yourself or whether it essentially starts from the viewpoint of God, and that makes all the difference in the world. In this case, this passage seems to be saying that if our viewpoint begins with ourselves, it's not as good. We don't get the right centerpiece, and that suffering happens for lots of reasons, but one of the reasons that it happens, and maybe a big reason, is that we might be humbled, that we might not rely on ourselves, but that we would rely on God. Johnny Erickson Tada often says that sometimes God gives things not from his right hand, but from his left hand. And that those aren't always the most pleasant things to receive, but better from his left hand than not from God at all. I've often wondered about that comment, but I think she's talking about the same thing here. It's a reliance on God that's the center. And then that reliance is so that other people will see. This verse ends that then many will give thanks on our behalf for the gracious favor granted us in answer to the prayers of many. And of course, he's including relationship in this, and the request for prayers in the midst of struggle. It draws us together, and we all point to God as the ultimate victor. A little bit later in Corinthians, there's a summary verse that you probably know that brings this all together. saying that my grace is sufficient, that it's enough, and that God's strength is shown in our weakness. And so God proves strong when we're at our weakest. That's such a countercultural, such a counter-American idea. We think that our strength is our strength. This verse is saying that your strength is your point of weakness because it demonstrates God's strength. Is that the kind of billboard that you are? When someone observes your life, do they see you relying on God? Do they see you being humbled and giving away the center seat to the one who deserves it? So let me, I've gone through these five and these five ideas, and I want to put forward to you this question. Do you think it's wise? Do you think this is a wise approach to think about the way that troubles can bring benefits? Should we be looking at trouble and trying to avoid it? Or should we be looking at trouble and thinking about the benefits that it might bring, so that we don't necessarily welcome the benefit, but we accept it as part of what life is, and we try to figure out how to move forward in it? Is this a wise approach? Do you think it's a hard thing? It just seems, as we're going through these discussions of the benefits of trouble, the benefits of suffering, that it's a hard thing to think about. And so my question for you is it worth it? Is it wise? So should we be thinking about the benefits that come in our hardest moments? I'm interested in what you have to think about that. Would you make a comment below in the comment section below? Like and subscribe if you would, but really would like to see your interaction on this particular topic. What do you think of the benefits of struggle and trouble? We'll see you next time on Let's Talk Heart to Heart.